Greetings, ladies, gentlemen, and others. Jolly Scholar 888 here. Welcome to my series, Blockchain to Metaverse. Discussion number 4, implications of blockchain and Bitcoin towards a decentralized global financial system. Yeah, it's a little bombastic as usual, but I'm thinking I could convince you with time. Within the last video, discussion number 3, I hope to have made the case that the early pioneers of blockchain and cryptocurrency were consciously striving towards a means to decentralize the global financial system. But why is that good? What's wrong with the current global banking system anyway? So in this presentation, we will discuss what many of us feel are the central issues within the present fiat system, not the least of which is the fact that it is becoming a central tool for global socialism. And then we will discuss how Bitcoin addresses those issues and to what extent it might succeed in replacing the financial currencies. All right, now the current global financial system is highly centralized, even monopolized. That's the main point, really. In previous discussions, I've pointed out how centralization of not only the present financial system, but of all historical financial systems of the past has always been a feature. Centralization was a fundamental characteristic of all financial systems, not a consequence, but an objective. To centralize a financial system was the purpose of minting money and institutionalizing a trading or banking system to begin with. Inflation, recession, high or low interest rates, if they actually posed any problems at all, it was simply that too much wealth was getting out of the hands of the concentrated few. These techniques, interest setting, money printing, inflation, bailouts, all of them increase and guarantee the centralization of wealth, and fiat currencies are the easiest currencies for deploying those tactics. The ease with which fiat currencies can be manipulated is precisely why it was invented and developed in the first place. When the Satoshi Nakamoto entity minted the first Genesis block of what was to become the Bitcoin blockchain, his choice of text on the Coinbase was a declaration of war against all that the Times headline was revealing. And the message was well understood by all of his fellow cypherpunks. The bailout referred to in that headline was, if we are to understand Satoshi, not a desperate recourse to a bad situation. As I pointed out, bailouts are a regular strategy among many strategies used by the banking system to further concentrate wealth into the hands of the few who control it. Bailouts, interest-setting, inflation, currency, devaluations, etc. These are features, not bugs. These are deliberate tactics for desired outcomes, not therapeutic remedies for a problem. The only problem was too much money getting out of the hands of the institutions who control the system. It is how the system regulates itself to maintain the status quo. It is this very centralization that makes the banking system so irresistible to the Marxist global maniacs. It is completely controllable from the top by a tiny minority as an arm of the government. But even beyond that, fiat is a monetary analogy to Marxist discourse theories. Money as a manufactured narrative. Truth as a generated narrative. Values as generated narratives. Fiat is a generated narrative that is minted and printed to be deployed as a means of economic exchange. Just as memes and narratives are generated as means of words and thought exchange, starting within the universities, from there into the media, and then throughout the society at large. Here's an introductory monologue by a fellow named Guy of the Coin Bureau, which is a crypto educational platform. In it, he sets the tone for his expose on fiat currency. I not only highly recommend this particular video, but I also highly recommend that if you only have time for one video a day or one video a week to devote to increasing your knowledge of cryptocurrency and the blockchain world in general, this is the fellow to follow. I can't recommend him enough. So here he is, Guy of the Coin Bureau on fiat currency.
Bitcoin is a Ponzi scheme, is the sentence which most grinds my gears. A falsehood that's knowingly propagated by bankers and unknowingly spread by ignorant no-coiners. The reason that this statement is so misguided is because it's being used as a ruse to deflect from one of the biggest and longest-running Ponzi schemes of all time. A system so fundamentally flawed that I'm honestly gobsmacked that it exists to this day. A proverbial house of cards where billions of sheeple seek cover. I am, of course, talking about the fiat money system. My name is Guy, and today I'm going to give you the matrix equivalent of the monetary red pill. By the end of this video, you will never be able to look at that money in your wallet in the same way again.
Here's another clip. This one is by Michael Saylor, the fellow I referred to earlier. He is the founder, CEO of MicroStrategy, an investment firm and a massive investor in Bitcoin. So listen to what he has to say.
If you're worried about inflation, if you're worried about competition, if you're worried about corruption, if you're worried about taxation, you want to run to the least risky thing you can find, the thing that's hardest to corrupt, that's hardest to tax. What is the product of Bitcoin? When you buy a Bitcoin, you're buying 1/21 millionth of all the money in the bank forever. That's what you're buying. What will the product be in 1,000 years? 1/21 millionth of all the money in the bank. It's the same every year for 1,000 years, right? If you're looking for the lowest risk place to go in an uncertain world, Bitcoin is the low risk institutional grade asset.
Saylor's interesting proposition. What about a Bitcoin limited to 21 million, say 50 years from now? Even 1,000 years from now? Bitcoin is anti-deflationary. One Bitcoin will be worth 1/21 millionth of all the money in the blockchain bank, perpetually, forever, as long as it lasts. Saylor is really addressing the issue of security. Security promotes mass adoption or scalability. But the physics of the Bitcoin blockchain limit that mass adoption. Yet, as a store of value, I think Saylor is right on. Compare what he is saying as opposed to the fiat system, which promotes mass adoption through a false sense of security, a security pasted together with narratives and manipulations that we are going to be discussing. But blockchain is also a complete effrontery to the very premise by which fiat is justified, and consequently, it is an affront to Marxist ideology itself. Truth, as determined by mathematics and science, is something the Marxist mentality cannot abide. For them, there is only one science, and that is political science. Reality itself is a political construct. We're witnessing this right now with the COVID response hoax. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm digressing again. So how is the value that Bitcoin represents different from the value represented by fiat currency? I'm not an economist, and I'm not pretending to be. I would advise those who are deeply interested to watch the full video by Guy at Coin Bureau and then follow that up with their own research. But let's take a look at how fiat currency is minted. As you can see, the factory process you are watching is printing currency at an enormous rate. But what is justifying it? What is the connection between the printing factory and the bank itself, other than printing the money? None. There are no banking processes being reflected by the rapid printing at all. There is no connection. The costs are minimum. At that scale, as you can see, 16% for $1, 14 cents for the $100 bills. There is no loan, no borrowing, no purchasing being represented by the money flying by at all. Furthermore, for each dollar printed, $10 to $20 will be loaned out through fractional reserve practices. These banks loan out more printed money than they actually have. How could this currency not, over time, lose value? Of course it does. It wasn't really worth anything to start with. But as we covered in the Bitcoin mechanics discussion, Bitcoin is minted only as a direct result of the blockchain processing actual exchanges. The bank, that is the Bitcoin blockchain, consists of an extensive network of nodes conducting proof-of-work validation that processes actual transactions and conducts extensive validation work in order to justify minting a single Bitcoin. The process is detailed and robust. No exchange, no work, no Bitcoin. As you can see in this particular slice, and what I mean by slice is that the Bitcoin Global Network is continually updating. That's just a photo of it at that moment. At that time, 15,101 nodes. I think in the last video there was 10,000. As I said, the process is detailed and robust. No exchange, no work, no Bitcoin. If the bank is not working and processing real transactions, there is no Bitcoin minted. There is no factory somewhere printing all day and night millions of Bitcoins out of nothing. You can see that this is the complete opposite of what you are watching on the screen above my head. The fiat currency represents absolutely nothing but the pennies it takes to print each bill. The factory printing the fiat all day and night has nothing to do with what the bank is doing at the same time. But each Bitcoin represents an extensive amount of work conducted by the blockchain, the Bitcoin bank. Furthermore, there can never be more than 21 million Bitcoins minted. So over time, how can Bitcoin not increase in value? While on the other hand, how can fiat currency over time not decrease in value? But that's not a bug. It's a feature. Fiat was designed to do exactly that. Fiat currency is designed to be eventually worthless. But only over time is that revealed. In the moment, the illusion of security is created because the currency is so scalable. We're going to talk a lot about scalability. Everyone can have some of this money in their hand at one time or another, maybe even a lot. But in the end, not only do you, the people, not own any part of the bank and the system it represents, but over time, what you are holding in your hand becomes steadily less and less valuable, so that by the time your grandchildren hold it, it's worth practically nothing. Again, that's not a bug, that's a feature. You, the people, already are on the way to owning nothing. Are you happy yet? Now, don't let me oversimplify. It's all more complicated than that. But do your own research, and then you let me know what you think in the comments. Write me in the email. I'd be curious to hear what the conclusions you come to. So what does Bitcoin accomplish? Why is it valuable? In the introductory presentation, it was impossible to talk about blockchain and not talk about Bitcoin because the two came into existence as a single phenomenon. So let's summarize the key points. Bitcoin is a monetary currency generated or minted on a blockchain ledger. A blockchain is a ledger system, a ledger for the recording and processing of transactions, which is essentially what a bank is. In this sense, the Bitcoin blockchain acts like a bank, and Bitcoin as the bank's currency. And in this way, a blockchain can be both a currency and a banking institution at the same time. It mints and stores value in a single process. So you cannot separate Bitcoin from the Bitcoin blockchain, which is the Bitcoin bank. So if you own Bitcoin, you own a part of the bank itself. It is a decentralized, publicly owned bank owned by the people who use it. Everyone who owns any amount of Bitcoin owns a stake in the bank, a direct stake in the financial institution they are engaged with. This is revolutionary. And furthermore, there will never be more than 21 million Bitcoin, so it cannot be inflated. You will always own, if you own a complete Bitcoin, 1/21 millionth of the bank for as long as Bitcoin exists. The next issue Bitcoin addresses is the fundamental issue of centralization. Its peer-to-peer network of validator nodes that we have described several times now, combined with its permissionless protocols, guarantees decentralization as a fundamental feature of the blockchain. But Bitcoin begins a motion towards not only decentralizing the banks, but potentially eliminating them. Obviously, this is not going to go over well with those who run the present banking and fiat system. A decentralized currency cannot be manipulated by a handful of people or institutions. That's bad news for the banks, who rely on their manipulations to maintain control over the money supply and its value. So let's continue. The Bitcoin blockchain is immutable. It cannot be changed, not without overwhelming difficulty, something we covered in the Bitcoin mechanics discussion. Being immutable is another way of saying that it is secure, which is what guarantees that whatever is processed on the chain did in fact take place as stated, because it cannot be changed. It is trustless in its protocols. One entity does not have to trust the entity with which it is creating a transaction with, and that's because every transaction on the blockchain must be verified. The transaction itself will not go through without verification. Transparent, every transaction can be viewed by anyone who looks at the blockchain ledger. It is secure. Again, over 15,000 nodes processing and validating the entire chain guarantees it. So now that we've covered what makes Bitcoin valuable, what are its limits? First of all, there was the phony attack about how Bitcoin was a threat to the environment because of its large energy consumption. Really, let me tell you, if all the minting factories for the banks were churning out massive amounts or eating up massive amounts of electricity, nobody would say a word. Today's environmentalism is just another hoax promoted by the globalists to shut down and or control economic sectors that they don't already have complete control over yet. We've already witnessed this tactic with their attacks on the oil and natural gas industries. China used the environment ruse as an excuse to expel all the Bitcoin miners. But it has become common knowledge that China is planning to create its own digital currency. So obviously, their real concern is that the party couldn't control Bitcoin, not the environment. Not to mention, they are the largest coal producers in the world, now that our unions and the Democratic Party under Obama sold the blue collar out. But I digress. But besides that, the banks of today are far more than large-scale ledger systems. They are involved in every aspect of human economic and social interactions. The crypto alternative has to be capable of the same scope for mass adoption as the global banking system has, if it hopes to even compete with the banks, much less replace them altogether. And make no mistake, that is the objective as far as many of us are concerned. To replace the current financial system, not join it, not coexist with it, replace it. But can Bitcoin alone achieve this? The simple answer is no. Its very security is at present a large part of the problem. Understanding the problem of Bitcoin's mass adoption is to understand the issue of scalability, or speed. So allow me to introduce the famous blockchain trilemma. We have three fundamental elements in any blockchain that must be addressed if the blockchain is to achieve mass adoption: decentralization, security, scalability, or speed. Any two of the elements in the trilemma can be sufficiently achieved, but only at the expense of the third. So for instance, a blockchain might achieve enough strength in two elements, for security and scalability, but their success will come at the expense of the remaining element, in this case, centralization. Any two can be achieved, but at the expense of the third. The Bitcoin blockchain triangle is very strong at the decentralization and security vectors, but very weak at the scalability vector. These constraints are established by the truths, the reality of mathematical relations, and the constraints of physics. Their solution also lies in physics and mathematics, not in a political shift of generated narratives. It is a scientific problem that can only be solved through science, and at this time it is of primary concern throughout the crypto world. A plethora of new blockchains have emerged to address this issue and other issues, each with their own creative solutions. And by the way, the blockchain trilemma was first pointed out by the brilliant young creator of the Ethereum blockchain, Vitalik Buterin, who we will introduce in the next presentation. To get an idea of Bitcoin's problem with scale, let's take a well-known non-blockchain money processing protocol, Visa. So Visa does around 25,000 transactions per second on average. And even Visa gets bottlenecked. They do about 1.5 million, something like that a day. So when a cashier tells you their computer is slow, the problem was just as likely Visa. Now Bitcoin, the approximate average TPS, transactions per second, get ready for it, is about 5. Though this may vary at times. Bitcoin processed around 330,000 daily transactions in December of 2020, reaching around 400,000 in early January 2021. Now, a new solution for Bitcoin called Lightning has come out in the last year, and it's improved the speed rather dramatically. But it's still much too slow to replace the global financial system. So as a store of value in a bank that acts more like a vault, Bitcoin works. But as a complete banking system, it really doesn't. So clearly, at this stage, Bitcoin cannot hope to replace the global fiat banking system. It will continue more than likely to serve as a source of stored value. This function will serve as the foundation upon which the newer, more sophisticated, and scalable blockchains can build upon. These new blockchains can in fact carry on the many different types of transactions that comprise a complete financial system: borrowing, lending, saving, establishing interest rates, exchanging currencies, etc. In fact, a new blockchain called Solana has already reached 65,000 TPS, approximately 2.5 that of Visa. So is Bitcoin doomed to become an interesting historical incident, but a failed experiment that nonetheless opened the door for its successors? Most people in the crypto space doubt that. As we've already witnessed, a few small countries like El Salvador have adopted Bitcoin as one national means of payment, that is, legal tender. And El Salvador has invested heavily in Bitcoin. However, the reason for that is that they receive so much of their annual revenue from remittances from overseas, mainly the US, that Bitcoin offers a direct transfer of funds without middlemen. It also acts as an anti-inflationary backup currency. Nonetheless, Bitcoin is not replacing their national bank, whose official currency is actually the US dollar. It is simply an addition to their economic arsenal, and I think a very smart, forward-thinking move on their part. So regardless of its eventual fate, Bitcoin and blockchain technology has taken on a central dilemma in human civilization using technologies based in mathematics, science, and transparency. Bitcoin is accelerating what I am calling the Great Reversal, a subject I have already discussed at length in previous discussions. So if not Bitcoin alone, then Bitcoin and its derivatives will, I am convinced, eventually succeed. Bitcoin has already taken one major step towards the decentralization of the global financial system. The implications should not be underestimated, and it was Bitcoin that ignited this motion. Bitcoin opened the door, and more than likely it will continue to function as a universal stored value for generations to come. So let's conclude this presentation with some comments that will summarize the Bitcoin phenomena and its implications from within a techno-anarchist overview, which is, after all, the purpose of this series. I am arguing that blockchain technology is a continuation of and an acceleration of the civilizational reversal that began with the American Revolution. A reversal towards a more decentralized, less hierarchical, more individual-based civilization. However, the adoption of fiat currency in 1933 was a severe step backwards. Fiat currencies, as I pointed out, was deliberately instituted by the global socialists, the global fascists, precisely because it is so easy to manipulate and monopolize. And keep in mind, when you hear the socialists babble on about equity and the people, global socialism is the pinnacle of the civilizational trend towards steeper hierarchies of concentrated power, not equality, as they pretend. This hoax is the greatest achievement of global socialism, getting you, the people, to believe that socialism is anything less than hierarchy and control on an unprecedented, massive scale. And of course, where do they succeed the best, or the most? In the universities. Where else? Convincing you, the people, that we are being empowered through nothing more than the manufacturing of narratives, narratives of consent, narratives like fiat currency, where all values in the end are mere political narratives, where the only science is political science, where you will own nothing and you'll be happy. So the interesting analogy presented by the blockchain trilemma is very provocative. The steep isosceles triangle, represented by fiat, or in fiat, as security and scalability at the cost of centralization, gives the illusion of security, while in reality this system is constantly being manipulated at the expense of the masses of people who engage with it. It is security for those who control the system, but not for you. That is a perennial social philosophical dilemma, isn't it? What are we, the members of any society or any community, willing to give up for ease of living? We have the virtue of the seemingly infinite scalability provided by fiat currency, and with that, the delusion of security. And we pay for it by accepting unlimited manipulation by a tiny fraction of the population. Bitcoin aims at a broad, equilateral triangle, equally, or at least sufficiently strong at all three vectors: decentralization, security, scalability. But it does fall short on the scalability side. Yet the issue remains. Bitcoin is more decentralized and more secure for the people, but less scalable for a complex society. It's not as easy to use. Ease of living. And that's a problem. It's a dilemma, and it faces all people. What are you willing to give up for comfort? So although we must give Bitcoin its due, we must also realistically conclude that while it did open the door to the goal of a decentralized financial system, it cannot accomplish that goal on its own. However, help is on the way. In the past few years, enormous strides have been taken towards the creation of a robust blockchain ecosystem that is capable of completely replacing the current global financial system. This exciting development will constitute the next discussion in this series. Discussion number 5, the altcoin explosion towards a decentralized financial system, or DeFi. For those of you who are not already familiar with this development, I think you're in for a real surprise. Dedicated people from all over the world have joined in this endeavor, and the results have been truly spectacular and revolutionary in their potential. I already mentioned how the blockchain Solana is 2.5 times faster than Visa. So I look forward to seeing you again in this next installation of my Blockchain to Metaverse series. And by the way, did I mention not only hashtag defund the universities, but hashtag defund NPR, hashtag defund PBS while we're at it?